He said I was too emotional for management. My coffee went cold before my tears did. That's the day I started buying his building. My name's Helen. I'm 45 years old. And this is the story of how silence became my revenge. I remember that morning like a smell. Cinnamon candle burning on my desk, cheap office brew pretending to be coffee, and my boss, Terrence Miller, standing in front of my cubicle like a disappointed father. Except I wasn't his child. I was his best employee, and he was about to break something in me he couldn't fix. HR says you make people uncomfortable, he said. My heart skipped. Uncomfortable? Yeah, he said, flipping through some paper he didn't need. You take things too personal. We need leadership that can separate feelings from work. I blinked. You mean leadership that ignores people crying in the break room? He smiled that corporate smile, the one that doesn't reach the eyes. Helen, maybe this just isn't the right position for you. Silence, that kind that hums, the kind that means we've already decided. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of him. I picked up my purse, nodded once, and said the line that would later make me a millionaire. You're right, Terrence. This isn't the right position for me. I belong higher. The bus home smelled like fried chicken and rain. My reflection in the window looked tired, not broken, just paused. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over my sister's name. Call her, I thought. Tell her they fired you. But instead, I opened notes and typed one sentence. Buy the building. I didn't know how. I didn't have a plan. I just knew that the next time Terrence Miller looked at me, it would be from a lease agreement, not across a cubicle. Girl, you gonna do what? That was my sister Rena when I told her over dinner that night. She nearly choked on her catfish. Buy the building? She laughed. You ain't even got a job. I got a reason, I said. That's stronger than a paycheck. She shook her head. You always talking like you in a movie. What you really gonna do, Helen? I smiled. Start small. Something I can sell. Something people can feel. The next week, I was in my kitchen with a $100 bill, a coupon book, and a dream that smelled like vanilla and defiance. Candles. That's where it started. Too emotional? Fine, I'd make emotions my business. I named my brand Soul Flame. Every scent told a story. Sunday strength, payday peace, no contact calm. I poured wax into jars late at night while gospel played low and my back ached from stirring. I sold 5 candles my first week, 30 the next. By month 3, I was shipping to Atlanta, D.C., and Chicago. And then came her, Chanel, the woman who ran the Gloss Room, the salon on the first floor of Terrence's building. She called me one day out of nowhere. Girl, I've been burning your forgiveness candle in my lobby all week. Clients love it. I smiled. That's one of my favorites. Listen, she said. I got an empty corner by the window. You ever thought about selling in person? That's how my candles met the world. One shelf at a time. I worked that booth every Saturday like it was church. People came in for hair, left with healing. One woman picked up a jar, sniffed, and started crying. Smells like my grandma's house, she whispered. That's when I knew I wasn't selling candles. I was selling memory. 3 years passed. The business grew. Soul Flame turned from a side hustle to an LLC, from a kitchen table to a warehouse. I hired 5 women, single mothers, laid-off nurses, and one college dropout who said she'd rather smell like lavender than despair. But the story didn't stop there. Not when I saw the headline, Corporate Downsizing Miller & Co. Sells Midtown Building. The same building. His building. I called Rena that night. Guess what's up for sale? She gasped. You lying? Nope. And you can afford that? Not yet, but give me 6 months. I got quiet, worked harder, started selling at pop-up events, farmers markets, even one fancy white folks fair where they charged $20 for parking and called lemonade artisan citrus. Didn't matter. I sold out in 3 hours. A local news anchor bought 3 Second Chances candles and gave me a shout-out on TV. Orders tripled overnight. That's when I met Marcus. He was a real estate investor who bought candles for his wife. Slick suit, smoother smile. "You the owner?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. He raised a brow. "You ever thought about expanding? Retail space? Maybe downtown?" I looked at him, dead in the eye. "Actually, I've been thinking about a particular building." 6 months later, I was sitting in that same lobby where Terrence once told me I was too emotional. Except now, the smell wasn't burnt coffee. It was my candle. Silent revenge. Warm amber, sandalwood, and pride. The real estate papers were thick, but my signature was steady. Marcus leaned over and whispered, "Congratulations, Miss Helen. You just bought your old boss's building." I smiled. Correction. I bought my peace. When Terrence walked in that day, I was ready. He looked older, smaller even, his tie too tight, his handshake weak. "Heard you bought the place," he said, forcing a grin. I did. "Well, that's impressive." "Thanks," I said. "The rent's due on the 1st. He laughed nervously. "You serious?" "As my candles," I said. "You can mail the check to Soul Flame, LLC. He looked at me for a long moment like he wanted to say something sharp, but all that came out was air. I didn't gloat, didn't raise my voice, just looked him dead in the eye and said, "Remember when you said I was too emotional for management? Turns out emotions pay better." That night, I stood outside my store, the new Soul Flame boutique, glowing under gold letters. People walking by stopped to take pictures. Chanel from the salon came out with champagne. "You did it, girl," she shouted. "You really did it." I smiled. We did it. Because every person who told me, "You're too much," every boss who said, "You care too much," every ex who said, "You dream too big," they all built the fire that kept me going. Now, when I walk into that building, I light one candle at the front desk, the same scent I made the night Terrence fired me. Starting over. Soft vanilla, hint of smoke. Because sometimes the fire that breaks you is the same one that builds your empire. I used to think revenge was loud, that it looked like slamming doors and shouting, "I told you so." But sometimes revenge sounds like a receipt printing, or a key turning in a door that used to be locked to you. That's what success sounds like when you earn it in silence. It had been 6 months since I bought Terrence's building, 6 months of rent checks from the same company that once fired me, but I didn't cash the first one right away. I framed it. It's still hanging behind my desk at the boutique, a reminder that peace and power can coexist. The day after the sale, the news made a small article about local Black female entrepreneur buys historic Midtown property. Small article, big reaction. Half the city cheered. The other half whispered, "Must have been luck." Luck, huh? Funny how they never call it luck when they own something. The first few weeks were a blur. Paperwork, inspections, contractors, permits. Marcus handled most of the legal stuff, but I was there every morning with coffee and notes. "You really love this building, huh?" Marcus said one day, watching me walk through the old office space. I smiled. "No. I love what it used to represent." He raised an eyebrow. "And now?" "Now," I said, "it represents what happens when a woman keeps her dignity and her receipts." We both laughed. But later that night, alone in my boutique, I cried a little. Not sad tears, release tears, the kind that say it's over now. Then came the call from Terrence's assistant. She was polite, nervous even. "Mr. Miller wanted to know if you plan to raise the rent this quarter." I sipped my tea and smiled. "Tell Mr. Miller that rent, like respect, increases when it's earned." She didn't know how to respond. "Have a blessed day," I said, before hanging up. Business was booming. I opened a second location in Atlanta with Rena managing it. She called me every night like a proud mama. "Girl, your candle's flying off these shelves. That closure scent? Whew, they buying it like therapy." I laughed. "That's because it is. Therapy." People started posting videos of my candles on TikTok, showing how the wax melted into hidden affirmations. That was my idea. Little words that appeared as the candle burned. "You're enough. Keep going. You're home now." It wasn't just business anymore, it was ministry. But success attracts eyes, and not all of them kind. I noticed a new tenant moving into one of the empty office suites on the 3rd floor, a familiar name on the door, Miller Consulting. Terrence had rebranded. Same arrogance, new logo. He saw me in the lobby one morning. "Morning, landlord," he said, adjusting his tie. "Morning, tenant," I replied. He chuckled. "You really made something of yourself, huh?" "I made something of what you left me with," I said. His smirk faltered. "You still bitter?" I smiled gently. "No, I'm busy." Then I walked away. That night, I posted my first video on Soul Flame's official page. No fancy filters, no music, just me in my boutique, holding one candle. "This one's called Grace After Grit," I said. "It's for anyone who ever got told they were too emotional, too ambitious, too loud, or too soft. Burn it. Let it remind you that peace is your loudest flex." Within hours, it went viral. 500,000 views, thousands of comments from women saying, "This is me." The next morning, Chanel texted me, "Girl, you trending. CNN just mentioned your brand." I stared at the message. Then I whispered to myself, emotions pay better. By the 3rd month, Miller Consulting was struggling. I could hear Terrence arguing with someone through his office door when I came to collect documents one day. "Don't talk to me about numbers," he snapped. "It's this damn location. Nothing but candle smoke and gossip downstairs." I almost laughed. My smoke, my gossip, my building. But I didn't gloat. Revenge, when it's pure, doesn't need witnesses. Then came the letter, a polite typed request to renegotiate the lease agreement due to unforeseen economic difficulties. Translation: we can't afford rent. I looked at Marcus. "What you gonna do?" he asked. "Exactly what he did to me," I said. "Be professional." I replied with corporate courtesy. "Dear Mr. Miller, I appreciate your transparency. However, emotional resilience and financial discipline are the qualities we prioritize at Soul Flame Holdings. Please remit your payment by the 1st of the month. Respectfully, Helen Carter, owner." The payment came in late, then later, then not at all. By month 6, he was behind 3 months' rent. Marcus called me one afternoon, cautious. "You want me to start eviction proceedings?" I paused. "Not yet." He frowned. "You getting soft?" "No," I said slowly. "I'm setting the stage." A few days later, I invited Terrence to a tenant appreciation mixer in the lobby. Free food, free drinks. He showed up in a wrinkled suit, trying to look confident. "Nice setup," he said. "Didn't know candles could buy all this." I handed him a glass of champagne. They didn't. Integrity did. Halfway through the evening, I got up to speak. The crowd quieted, cameras rolling. "I just want to thank every tenant for believing in local businesses," I said. "And a special thank you to Miller Consulting for teaching me what leadership shouldn't look like." A soft gasp rippled through the room. Terrence froze, face red. I smiled sweetly. "Growth is a beautiful thing. Let's raise a glass to new beginnings." Everyone clapped. He left early. The next morning, his office door was open, empty, a folded note on the floor. "You win, Helen." T. Marcus found me later that day. "He's gone. Defaulted on the lease. We can reclaim the space." I nodded. "Turn it into something better." "What you thinking?" he asked. "A community studio," I said. "Workshops, mentorship, candle-making classes for women trying to start over." 3 months later, Soul Flame Studio opened on that very floor. The same floor where Terrence once called me too emotional. Now filled with laughter, wax, and gospel music. We held our first class for single mothers that winter. Each woman left with her own candle, labeled Reignite. One of them hugged me after class. "Miss Helen," she said softly, "your story gave me hope." I smiled. Then my fire did what it was supposed to do. The following year, Soul Flame got featured in Essence magazine. Headline, "From Fired to Founder, the woman who turned pain into power." They asked me during the interview, What do you think your old boss would say if he saw you now? I laughed. He'd probably ask for a discount. But truthfully, I didn't need his validation. My success didn't need his apology. It only needed my patience. Because revenge isn't about making someone else small. It's about making yourself whole. Now, every time I light a candle in my store, I think about that cold cup of coffee on the day I was fired, how bitter it tasted, and how sweet it feels now to know that coffee paid for my first shelf of jars, that shelf paid for my first storefront, and that storefront paid for his building. Poetic, ain't it? Success changes you, not the way people think, not flashy cars or fancy bags. It changes how quiet you become, how you stop explaining, stop defending, stop proving. Because when the light hits right, your story speaks louder than any brag ever could. That's what I learned the year after Terrence left. Soul Flame was booming. We had 2 stores, 3 studio locations, and 1 warehouse filled with dreams in glass jars. Rena was managing the Atlanta branch, and my niece Kayla had come on board to handle social media. TikTok wants another day-in-the-life video, Auntie, she said, camera in hand. I groaned. Girl, people don't care about me pouring wax. Wrong, she said. They care about your peace. She was right. The internet fell in love with my quiet strength. Every clip of me labeling candles or tying ribbons hit 1 million views. Not because I was doing anything special, but because peace looked good on a woman who used to cry in the break room. One morning, I came into the boutique to find a delivery waiting. A thick envelope with my name handwritten in cursive. Inside, an invitation. You are cordially invited to speak at the Women in Business Gala, downtown Marriott Ballroom. My heart skipped. That event was big. Sponsors, press, CEOs, the same people who used to look past me like I was invisible. The theme that year? From fired to founder, the power of second chances. I smiled. God, you funny, I whispered. The night of the gala, I wore a cream suit, hair pinned up, gold hoops glinting under the lights. Marcus met me there, looking sharp as ever. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be, I said. The ballroom smelled like lilies and ambition. I could feel eyes on me as I walked to the stage. When I stepped up to the mic, I took a breath. Slow, deep, steady. 3 years ago, I began. I was fired for being too emotional. Now I own the building they fired me in. Laughter, applause, gasps. I waited for it to settle. I used to think emotions made me weak, I continued, but it's our emotions that give our purpose flavor. They make our dreams stick to our bones. I told them about Soul Flame, how it started from pain and grew from purpose, how every candle I poured was a prayer, and how I learned that silence can scream louder than revenge when you light it with grace. By the end, the room was on its feet, cameras flashing, reporters rushing, but one face caught my eye, standing near the back. Terrence. He looked different. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. Our eyes met. For a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself. I nodded at him. Once, soft. He nodded back. Later that night, he approached me in the lobby. Congratulations, he said quietly. You did good. I smiled. Thank you. I deserved what I got, he said. I just didn't expect it to hurt this long. I sipped my water. Growth usually does. He hesitated. You think we could ever talk? Not about business, just talk. I thought about it for a moment, then said, maybe, one day, and walked away. 2 weeks later, a storm hit the city. Heavy rain, streets flooded, power out in half the block. While everyone else panicked, I opened my store and handed out free candles. People came in soaked and cold, leaving with light in their hands. Rena called me from Atlanta, laughing. Girl, you out here saving the city with scented wax. I smiled. God works in mysterious fragrances. The local paper did a piece on it. Candle Queen brings light to the storm. That's when the offers started coming. Investors, franchises, reality TV producers. Kayla was giddy. "Auntie, they want to follow you for a docu-series." I shook my head. I didn't build this for cameras. "But think about how many women you could inspire." I paused. That part was true. So I said yes, but only if I could tell the stories my way. The show aired 3 months later, Soul Flame from Fired to Founder. It wasn't drama-filled. It wasn't flashy. It was just real. Me, my team, our customers, our laughter, our healing. The final episode ended with me walking through the old office floor, now the Soul Flame studio, surrounded by women pouring candles. The camera zoomed in as I said, "Forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about unhooking yourself from the pain." The credits rolled. Then the numbers came in. Record-breaking views. Top 10 on streaming. And then, the call. "Miss Carter?" a soft voice said on the line. "Yes?" "This is Denise from the City Development Council. We're offering you the Community Builder Award this year." I froze. "The what?" "The highest recognition for local business impact." When I hung up, I just sat there, quiet, thinking about that first candle I made with borrowed wax in a shaky hand, and now an award from the same city that once ignored me. The ceremony was beautiful. Gold lights, jazz music, applause echoing like thunder. But the moment that broke me, really broke me, came at the end. As I stood holding the plaque, a group of women came up from the crowd, all different ages, all with candles in their hands. They formed a circle around me, and one said, "These are the women your story lit up." My throat tightened. Tears, the good kind, filled my eyes. I whispered, "Thank you." After the event, Marcus walked me to my car. "You ever gonna slow down?" he teased. I laughed. "I think slowing down is how people forget who they are." He smiled. "Then maybe just breathe." He wasn't wrong. I'd been moving nonstop, from pain to purpose to platform. But part of me missed the quiet moments. The smell of wax cooling in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge, and the sound of gospel on the radio. I didn't want to lose that, because that's where I found myself. That weekend, I closed the boutique early and went home. No meetings, no cameras, just me and a pot of wax on the stove. I poured a candle for myself this time, named it Homecoming. As it set, I sat by the window watching the rain fall again, just like the night I got fired. Only this time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like peace. When the wax hardened, I lit it and whispered, "This one's just for me." The flame flickered, and for the first time in years, I rested. The next season of my life came with no script, no roadmap, no mentor, no warning label. Just me, a growing business, and a heart trying to heal in public. Because when success comes, people don't tell you that peace has its own price tag. And sometimes that price is people. "Girl, you changed," Rena said one night over FaceTime. She was in her Atlanta store, braids tied up, receipts in her hand. "Changed how?" I asked, stirring my tea. "You got quiet," she said. "Used to call me about every little thing. Now it's just press releases and investors." I smiled softly. "Rena, quiet don't mean cold. It means careful." She frowned. "You sure? 'Cause sometimes it feels like you building something too high for us to reach." Her words stung. I didn't realize success had made me distant, but it had. Somewhere between expansion and exposure, I'd lost the small things. Family dinners, church picnics, lazy Saturdays. Then came the knock on my office door. Kayla walked in, eyes red. "Auntie, we got a problem." She handed me her phone. On the screen, a viral post. Soul Flame accused of stealing candle designs from small creators. Hundreds of comments, thousands of shares. My stomach dropped. "What?" "It's not true," Kayla said quickly. "Someone's lying for clicks, but people are eating it up." I scrolled through the accusations, fake screenshots, edited emails. One comment stuck out. "That's what happens when they get a little fame. They forget where they came from." The words burned deeper than I wanted to admit. Within hours, the press picked it up. Reporters outside the store, calling, emailing, demanding statements. Marcus came by, calm but serious. "We need to handle this strategically," he said. "Crisis management, PR spin, lawyer letters." I cut him off. "No spin, truth." He blinked. "You sure?" "Always," I said. "We built this brand on transparency. We'll fight with the same light we sell." That night, I went live on Instagram. No makeup, no filter, just me in my store with candles burning behind me. "I've seen the rumors," I began, steady, "and I won't defend lies, but I will tell the truth." I told them about my journey, from the day Terrence fired me to now. I reminded them that Soul Flame was born out of honesty, out of healing, out of heart, and that no viral post could take away what was built in integrity. The live hit 2 million views. The next day, the truth came out. The screenshots were fake. The accuser deleted their account. But by then, something had already shifted. I realized fame was fragile, and peace, even more so. A week later, I visited my mama's grave. She'd passed years ago, but her words lived rent-free in my spirit. "Helen, don't ever let success make you smaller than the woman you prayed to be." I knelt down, placed a faith over fear candle beside her headstone, and whispered, "I'm still her, Mama, just learning to protect my light." That same month, I got another call, this time from a university. They wanted to add a Soul Flame case study to their business ethics course. Imagine that. Me, who once couldn't afford tuition, now part of a syllabus. I laughed through tears when I hung up, because life, for all its storms, still has a funny way of circling back with blessings you never ordered. But while I was busy healing publicly, Marcus had been carrying something privately. One evening, he came by the boutique after closing. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Always," I said. He handed me a folder. Inside, bank documents. I frowned. "What's this?" "An offer," he said. "A major investor wants to buy 60% of Soul Flame, expand nationwide. I wanted you to see it first." I stared at the numbers. They were life-changing, but something in my gut went cold. 60%? I whispered. He nodded. They'd handle distribution, marketing, global rollout, and I'd handle... What? Smiling for interviews? He hesitated. "Helen, this could make you a household name." I looked around the boutique, at the candles, the scents, the photos of my team. Then I shook my head. "I didn't start this to be a name. I started it to be a light." He sighed. "You sure?" "Absolutely," I said. "I didn't fight to own my piece just to sell it." The next week, I gathered the team. We had a potluck, mac and cheese, collard greens, cornbread, the works. I stood up, glass in hand. "Y'all, people been offering us money, fame, exposure, but none of that smells better than what we already got. This company ain't for sale. It's for service." The room erupted in cheers. Rena shouted, "That's my sister!" Kayla cried. And for the first time in months, I felt home again. But destiny wasn't done testing me yet. 2 days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Return address, Miller and Comber Terrence. Inside was a handwritten note. "Helen, I heard about the false accusations and wanted to say, you handled it better than I ever did. I've been humbled. If you ever need consulting help, I'd be honored to work under you. Respectfully, Terrence Miller." I read it twice, then 3 times, not out of disbelief, but gratitude. Because that's what real revenge looks like, when the people who hurt you end up learning from your peace. Later that night, I lit a new candle, one I hadn't named yet. I thought about calling it Closure, but as the flame danced, I realized it wasn't closure I'd found. It was clarity. Clarity that I didn't need validation, didn't need revenge anymore, didn't even need to win. I just needed to keep glowing, steady, quiet, and sure. The next morning, I framed Terrence's note right beside his old rent check. One symbolized his disbelief in me, the other, his respect. Together, they told the full story. And every time a customer walks in and asks, "What's that on the wall?" I smile and say, "That's what transformation looks like when you let grace lead." People talk about winning like it's a finish line, but it's not. Winning is a rhythm. You rise, you stumble, you rebuild, you rise again. And sometimes it's the quiet rebuilds that echo the loudest. I was learning that all over again. The year after the scandal and the investor offers, I entered a new kind of storm. One that didn't come from the outside. It came from inside the house. Kayla, my niece, my right hand in social media, the voice behind our viral posts, came into my office one morning, tears brimming. "Auntie," she whispered, "I think I messed up." I paused mid-email. "What's wrong, baby?" She handed me her phone. There it was. An internal message thread accidentally posted to our public page. Private discussions, pricing, upcoming scent launches, and one note where I'd vented about an influencer deal that felt fake. The post had already been up an hour. Hundreds of screenshots, thousands of comments. Marcus called within minutes. "Damage control, Helen. We can spin this." I exhaled. "No spin, Marcus. Not this time." "You can't be serious." "I am. We tell the truth again. That's our brand." So I went live. Again. Just me, a candle, and honesty. "Sometimes transparency ain't pretty," I said into the camera. "Sometimes it's messy, human, and unfiltered. But that's what Soul Flame has always been. Human. We make candles for real people, not perfect ones." The comment section flooded with hearts. Women writing, "That's why we love you, Aunt Helen." Men commenting, "Wish more CEOs talked like this." Within hours, what could have been a scandal turned into a standing ovation. Kayla cried when she saw the response. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I hugged her. "Don't be. You just reminded the world that we're real." But while the world forgave quickly, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Tired. Not physically, spiritually. Every battle, every headline, every expectation was starting to weigh on me. Rena noticed first. "Girl, you ain't laughed from your belly in months," she said over brunch. I stirred my grits. "Ain't had much reason." "That's a lie," she said. "You got more reasons than most folks breathing." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, but when you're the light for everybody else, sometimes you forget to stand near your own flame." She reached across the table, held my hand. "Then maybe it's time you remember." That night, I drove out of the city. No GPS, no plan, just roads and thoughts. Ended up at the beach around midnight. Moon high, waves slow. I kicked off my shoes and walked to the water's edge, the air thick with salt and silence. For the first time in a long time, I prayed. Not for success, not for revenge, not even for strength, just for stillness. "Lord," I whispered, "let me enjoy what I built before I burn out trying to build more." The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls. Kayla again. I called her back. "Auntie," she shouted, breathless. "We're sold out." I blinked. "Of what?" "Everything. The site crashed overnight. The video you posted hit 10 million views." My heart skipped. "What video?" She giggled. "Your prayer, Auntie. Someone recorded you on the beach, the part where you said, 'Let me enjoy what I built.' It went viral on TikTok. They're calling it the prayer for the tired woman." I laughed so hard I cried. "You mean my breakdown is trending?" She grinned through the phone. "More like your breakthrough." By noon, Soul Flame candles were back-ordered for 3 months. Churches started ordering bulk for women's retreats. Therapists began using my prayer in sessions. A gospel artist even turned my words into a song. It was surreal. I didn't plan it. I didn't market it. It was just me being human. And somehow, that was enough. But fame. Fame never knocks without bringing new tests. A few weeks later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Helen Carter." "Yes? This is Lydia from Oprah Daily. We'd like to feature you on our Women Who Light the Way segment." I froze. I'd made it into rooms I never even dreamed of. The interview aired a month later. Millions watched as I shared my story, from being fired to buying the building to turning pain into purpose. I ended it the same way I ended every speech. Silence became my revenge, but peace became my profit. After the show, the calls came pouring in again. Book publishers, motivational tour managers, TV producers. Marcus smiled like a proud brother. "Helen, this is your moment." But I just stared at the contracts, money, exposure, global platforms, all the things I used to dream of. And yet, my heart whispered, not yet, because something was shifting. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. One Sunday afternoon, I closed the store early and invited the team upstairs. We gathered around the long wooden table, wax-stained, candle-scented, full of history. "I've been thinking," I began. "This business started with one woman trying to heal. Now it's time for Soul Flame to help others do the same." They watched, quiet. "We're starting a new program, the Light Project. Free candle-making courses for women leaving domestic violence, job loss, or incarceration. A fresh start through fire and fragrance." Chanel clapped first. Rena shouted, "Amen," and Kayla cried again. She always did at full circle moments. The Light Project launched that spring. First class, 12 women. By summer, over 200 across 3 cities. I watched them learn to pour wax like I once did. Shaky hands, heavy hearts, hopeful eyes. And every time they lit their first candle, I saw myself in their glow. One woman, Latrice, hugged me after class. "Miss Helen," she said, voice trembling, "I've been through hell. But when I lit my candle today, I felt like I forgave myself." I smiled through tears. "Baby, that's what light does. It don't erase the dark. It reminds you it never won." That night, after everyone left, I stood in the studio alone. Dozens of candles flickered in rows, their flames reflected off the windows, multiplying like a small galaxy. And for a second, I felt my mama there. Warm, proud, humming that old gospel tune she used to sing while cleaning. I whispered into the light, "Look, Mama, they can't dim what you raised. They say light attracts everything, beauty, moths, and sometimes shadows. And when your light burns steady long enough, those shadows start to show their faces." That's exactly what happened the year Soul Flame hit national shelves. Target, Walmart, Macy's. Our candles were everywhere. A Black-owned brand, born in a kitchen, now shining under fluorescent lights across America. It was a victory, but also a battlefield. Because the higher you climb, the more people test your foundation. The first storm came from within. Marcus, my business partner, my rock through the early years, started changing. More meetings without me. More private phone calls. When I asked, he brushed it off. "Just logistics stuff. Don't worry." But my gut told me to worry. One afternoon, I walked into the warehouse and found him talking to 2 men in suits. They went silent the moment they saw me. "Everything okay?" I asked. Marcus smiled too quickly. Yeah, just potential distributors." Without me. They reached out last minute. He was lying. I could feel it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the light low and the smell of homecoming burning beside me. I pulled out the contract he'd had me sign months ago, the one that gave him limited power of attorney for expansion. Something told me to read the fine print, and that's when I saw it. A clause I hadn't noticed before, one that gave him the right to negotiate partial ownership if the company reached a national distribution threshold. In other words, the moment we hit shelves across the country, he could sell pieces of my dream. I called Rena first. "Girl," she said, "I knew something was off with him lately." "I trusted him," I whispered. "Trust don't mean blind, Helen. It means you expect honesty." I sighed. "Well, I'm about to demand it." The next morning, I showed up at the office early. Waited. When Marcus walked in, briefcase in hand, he looked startled to see me. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied, sliding the contract across the desk. "Explain this." He tried to smile. "It's just business, Helen." "No," I said. "It's betrayal with a spreadsheet." He exhaled. "You built something amazing, but it's getting bigger than you. You need help." I needed honesty, I shot back, not control. The room went cold. He finally said, "If we want to compete globally, you have to let go a little." I leaned forward, eyes steady. "I let go once, Marcus. When I lost my job, my peace, my self-worth, I'll never let go of what I built again." The meeting ended in silence. By sunset, I'd called my lawyer. By sunrise, Marcus was gone. Buyout settled, partnership dissolved. It hurt, deep. He wasn't just a partner, he was family. But sometimes the only way to protect your flame is to snuff out the smoke around it. A month later, I visited the Soul Flame studio. The women were there, Asina pouring, laughing, creating. I stood in the doorway, watching them build something with the same fire I once carried alone. Latrice noticed me and smiled. "Miss Helen, you good?" I nodded. "I am now." "Then come pour one with us," she said. So I did. And that simple act, melting wax, mixing fragrance, labeling jars, it grounded me again. Success had made me float, but creation brought me home. The next season brought new blessings. We launched Soul Flame Kids, a line of safety candles and bedtime scents for children afraid of the dark. Kayla designed the labels herself, smiling stars, brown moons, little affirmations like, "You're safe now." I got emotional holding the first batch because I realized I wasn't making candles anymore. I was making comfort. Then came the award ceremony. The National Black Business Summit named me Entrepreneur of the Year. Big stage, bigger crowd. The host asked me before I went up, "What are you going to say when you win?" I smiled. Something true. When they called my name, I walked up slow, steady, like a woman carrying her ancestors with her. I looked out at the crowd and said, "I used to think success meant being seen, but success is when the people you helped start shining too. If my light's bright, it's because I'm surrounded by 1,000 others reflecting it back. Standing ovation, tears everywhere. But the best part? After the ceremony, an old man approached me, cane, gray suit, kind eyes. "You don't know me," he said, "but I used to work in the same building where you started. You've changed lives, ma'am." Then he handed me a faded photo of me at my old cubicle years ago, standing beside a younger version of him. "I kept this," he said, "to remind me not to give up." I cried right there in the lobby. A week later, I got an email from Terrence. Subject line, "Thank you for the light. Helen, I watched your speech. You taught me more in that moment than any business book ever could. I'm working with young entrepreneurs now, mostly women, trying to help them build, not break. Thank you for showing me what leadership really looks like." I didn't reply. Some stories don't need a sequel. That night, I walked through the boutique alone. Lights dim, candles glowing like quiet applause. I stopped by the front window, looked out at the city that once ignored me, and I whispered, "We did it." The reflection looking back at me wasn't the tired woman who once got fired. It was the woman who learned how to turn silence into legacy. Before locking up, I lit one last candle, a blend I'd been saving. Sandalwood, honey, smoke. I named it Unbroken, because that's what I'd become. Not flawless, not fearless, just unbroken. People always ask me now, "How did you do it, Helen? How'd you go from being fired to being a phenomenon?" And I always smile and say the same thing. I stopped trying to prove them wrong. I started proving me right. But behind that smile is the truth. The climb didn't end at success. It just got steeper. After Marcus left, I thought the hardest parts were behind me. But peace has a funny way of getting tested the moment you think you've earned it. A few months later, I got a call from an unknown number. Miss Carter? Yes? This is Evelyn Brooks. I'm with the National Women's Foundation. We're creating a mentorship fellowship for underrepresented founders. We want you to lead it. I was flattered but cautious. I appreciate that, I said, but I've got a lot on my plate. She laughed gently. That's exactly why you're perfect for it. These women need someone who's walked through the fire and didn't come out bitter. Her words stuck. The first day of the fellowship, 15 women sat in front of me, all different ages, all carrying something heavy behind their eyes. One young girl, barely 21, whispered, "Miss Helen, I've been fired 3 times. I think maybe I'm just not built for this." I smiled. "Baby, they said the same about me. Now they pay rent in my building." The room laughed, the kind of laughter that heals. That was the start of something bigger than me. We met every week. I taught them business, branding, budgeting. But mostly, I taught them how to believe again, how to let rejection sharpen, not shatter, how to carry grace even when the world gives you none. After class one night, a woman named Patrice stayed behind. She said, "Miss Helen, my husband told me I'm wasting time chasing dreams. Said women like me don't make it far." I looked her dead in the eye. "Then make sure when you do, you send him a postcard from the top." She laughed through tears, and 3 months later, she launched her own catering company. First client? Soul Flame Studios. While mentoring them, I started writing again. Not for the brand, not for the press. For me. Late nights, quiet house, cup of tea, soft jazz playing low. I wrote about the small things success doesn't prepare you for. Loneliness, guilt, imposter syndrome. And slowly the pages started turning into a book. Title, Lit from Within, How I Turned My Silence into a Legacy. When it was done, I didn't send it to a publisher. I printed 50 copies myself, one for each woman in the Light Project and the Fellowship. On the first page, I wrote, "For every woman who was ever told she was too emotional, use that fire. It's your gift." They cried. I cried. And somehow, the book spread on its own. Church groups passed it around. Podcasts quoted it. Then Oprah mentioned it. Again. Next thing I knew, my inbox was full of speaking invitations from everywhere. Schools, prisons, shelters, even corporate conferences. But the one that hit hardest came from the most unexpected place. Miller & Coors Consulting, Terrence's new firm. The email subject line, request for keynote speaker, rebuilding through grace. I stared at it for a long minute. Then I laughed, out loud. Life has a sense of humor sharper than any writer I know. When I walked into their conference hall, it was déjà vu. Same tone of carpet, same stale coffee, same polished smiles. Except this time, I wasn't the one being evaluated. I was the one holding the mic. Terrence introduced me himself. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "today's speaker once worked under me. But truthfully, she ended up teaching me more than I ever taught her." The crowd clapped. I smiled. Then I stepped up to the podium and began. "I used to sit in a cubicle not far from here," I said, thinking success meant being promoted. But success isn't a promotion. It's a permission slip. A permission slip to show up fully, unapologetically, and unbroken. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Back then, I thought my voice was a liability. Turns out, it was my greatest investment. The room was still. Even Terrence, eyes wet, head bowed, stayed silent. When I finished, the applause didn't just sound like clapping. It sounded like closure. After the event, Terrence approached me one last time. "Can I say something?" he asked. "Of course." "I used to think power came from control," he said softly. "Now I know it comes from compassion. You taught me that." I nodded. "Took us both a few fires to figure that out." He chuckled. "Guess so." Then for the first time, we shook hands. Not as boss and employee, not as rivals, but as two people finally free from the past. Months passed. The fellowship grew. The Light Project expanded to 5 cities. Kayla got engaged. Raina opened her own candle cafe. And me? I learned how to rest without guilt. One Sunday, I stood in the middle of my store while the morning sun poured through the windows, customers browsing, laughter floating, and I thought, this is it, this is peace. Woman walked in, probably mid-30s. She hesitated, then said, "Are you Aunt Helen? From TikTok?" I laughed. "That's what they call me." She smiled nervously. "Your stories got me through my divorce. I bought your forgiveness candle the day I left my ex. Now I'm opening my own store. Same scent on the shelves." I felt tears rise. "You did that, baby," I said. "You lit your own flame." She hugged me tight, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't my story anymore. It belonged to every woman who ever found power in pain. That night, I closed up early again, just like I used to. I walked to the rooftop, city lights glittering below. I lit one candle, no label, no brand, just light, and I whispered, "For every woman who ever got told she was too much, may your fire burn so bright they'll wish they'd treated you warmer." The wind picked up, but the flame didn't go out. It danced, like it knew exactly what it was doing. When I was a little girl, Mama used to tell me, "Baby, the Lord don't waste pain. He just waits for you to stop hiding it so he can plant something through it." I never understood that. Not until I looked around one day and realized every broken piece of my story had bloomed into somebody else's hope. The store was quiet that morning. No cameras, no investors, just me and the hum of the ceiling fan. I'd stopped chasing growth and started cultivating peace. That's when success finally started to feel soft. Rena called just as I was restocking the forgiveness shelf. "Guess what?" she shouted. "What, girl?" "They just called. The city's naming next Saturday Soul Flame Day." I froze. "What?" "You heard me. They honoring your community work, your women's programs, all of it. Parades, speeches, the whole 9. I leaned against the counter, heart pounding. For the first time, the recognition didn't feel like pressure. It felt like home. The week leading up to Soul Flame Day was a blur of phone calls, interviews, and event prep. Kayla organized a pop-up booth for local women vendors. Rena coordinated a gospel choir. Even Terrence offered to sponsor candles for the ceremony. I smiled at that email. Life really does have chapters you could never write yourself. On the morning of the celebration, the city glowed. Banners lined the street. "Light lives here." Crowds filled the park. Children waved small candles made of paper and glitter. The mayor took the stage first, saying words I could barely process. Then he said, "And now, the woman whose story turned pain into purpose, Miss Helen Carter." The applause rolled like thunder. I walked up slow, steady, every step a flashback. The bus ride home after being fired, the nights I poured wax till sunrise, the first sale, the first tear, the first check that came with his name on it. When I reached the mic, I took a breath that carried 10. Years of silence, struggle, and surrender. "I used to think revenge was about getting even," I began. "But real revenge, it's peace. It's walking past the people who doubted you, not to rub it in, but to remind yourself you made it without bitterness." The crowd was still. I could see women crying, nodding, men holding their wives' hands, children looking up, smiling. "I started this journey with a candle," I continued. "But truth is, I was the one who needed light. And somewhere along the way, I realized light ain't supposed to be kept. It's meant to be shared." Then I did something unplanned. I pulled a small candle from my purse. Homecoming. I lit it, shielded the flame with my hand, and whispered, "For every woman still trying to find her way." Then I passed it to a girl in the front row. "Keep it going," I said. She passed it to the next woman, then another and another. Within minutes, the park was full of tiny flames, a sea of light. The choir started singing, "This Little Light of Mine." And I swear, even the wind stopped to listen. After the ceremony, people lined up to hug me, take pictures, share stories. But one moment stood still in my mind, a woman, maybe late 50s, trembling as she held my hands. "You don't know me," she said, "but I was your HR manager back at Miller & Co." My heart skipped. She looked older now, softer. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I watched what they did to you," she whispered. I wanted to speak up, but I was scared. I carried that guilt for years. I squeezed her hands. "You don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself forgiveness." She sobbed quietly. I hugged her, because life isn't about keeping score. It's about letting grace win every round. Later that night, after the crowds went home and the park lights dimmed, I stood under the stage archway, alone. The air still smelled like wax and applause. Kayla ran up behind me, phone in hand. "Auntie, we hit 50 million views." I laughed. "For what?" "Your speech. Someone streamed the whole thing. You're everywhere again." I smiled. Then, "Let's make sure it's for something good." Back at home, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, peppermint and peace. The city hummed outside, distant but warm. I opened my journal, the one I started years ago when I first typed, "Buy the building." On the last page, I wrote, "I didn't just buy the building, I rebuilt the woman who walked out of it." Then I closed it, because that chapter was done. Months passed. The fellowship expanded nationwide. We partnered with shelters, schools, and prisons, teaching women how to build businesses from pain instead of just surviving it. Patrice, my former mentee, called one evening. "You'll never believe this," she said. "My catering business just got a contract with the Hyatt." I laughed. "I told you to send that." "Postcard from the top." She laughed too. "Consider it mailed." Soulflame became more than candles. It became a movement. We started doing light restorations, events where we'd go into burned-out communities, rebuild small businesses, and teach financial healing. We even opened a branch in Jamaica, then Ghana, then South Africa. Everywhere we went, women said the same thing. "Miss Helen, you helped me find my light again." And every time I told them, "No, baby, you already had it. I just handed you a match." The day Oprah herself visited our flagship store, the world seemed to tilt. She walked in quiet, her team behind her, but her presence filled the room like sunrise. I smiled, shaking my head. "Ma'am, you didn't tell me you were coming." She laughed. "Would you have let me in if I did?" We talked for an hour, about business, faith, and forgiveness. Before she left, she held up one of my candles. "This," she said, "isn't just wax. It's ministry." And I knew then that Mama's words had come full circle. My pain had been planted, and look what it grew. Now, when people walk into Soulflame, they don't just see candles. They see legacy. Photos line the walls. Women smiling, holding their first products, their first paychecks, their first signs that say, "Open." Sometimes I just stand in the doorway, listening to the laughter, the clinking of jars, the music, and I think, this is what healing sounds like. Tonight I sit here writing this. The last page of my story, maybe not the end, but the peace after the storm. There's a candle burning beside me, soft and steady. It's called Full Circle. Smells like orange blossom, oak, and answered prayers. I take a deep breath and smile, because after everything, the loss, the grind, the betrayal, the rebuilding, I finally understand Mama's favorite saying, "The fire that tried to burn you was the same one God used to light your path. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.